Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome out to Crossroads students. My name is Brody. How are you doing? How are you doing? That's what I want to know. Are you doing good this morning? Hi to everybody in this room. Also, hi to everybody in all of our rooms at all of our locations. We're one student ministry. We're called Crossroads Students. Two claps for Crossroads Students. Come on. It's going to be a great day. We are in week 3 of a series called Every Day. So everybody say every day. Go ahead. Everybody say every day. Every day, it's a series about how we engage with God. How do we relate with God? How does this faith that we talk about or this relationship that we talk about here at Crossroads Students with God, how do we live that out every day? And there are ancient practices that help us do that. But today we're going to break down one. We're going to break down baptism. Now, baptism, you may have seen a video about for the very first time today. You just watched a video a couple minutes ago and you saw people going underwater and then coming back up and people cheering and clapping. Maybe that was your first encounter with baptism. But my guess is that many of us in this room have experienced baptism to some degree. Now, for some of us, we've been baptized. Who's been baptized in here? Raise your hand. Good job. I like how we're cheering for that. That's a good thing you've been baptized. Maybe you haven't been baptized, though, but you've seen a baptism. Has anyone in here seen a baptism before? Most hands are in the air in this room. I'm sure most hands are in the air in that room too, because many of us just went to camp. Who was at camp just this last summer? I mean, we just got back a couple weeks ago and we baptized, wait for it, we baptized almost 300 students at camp. You can give it up for that. So my guess is that many of us have experienced baptism to some degree, but whether your first time experiencing it was watching this video today or you've been baptized, wherever you are on that spectrum, we're talking about it today because there's overlap. There's overlap for all of us because many of us are still trying to figure out, why do we do baptism? What's it all about? Why do people get wet? Why do we have to go into a hot tub that's not really hot? Why do we do it? And how does it apply to me every day? How does it help me walk out my faith every day? We're going to figure out that today. But before we get there, I've got to address the elephant in the room. Okay, there's an elephant in this room, and there's probably elephants in those rooms there too. If you're watching online, there's elephants. The elephant in this room is that somebody here stinks. I mean, like literally, like smells. Do you smell it? Try, smell with me. Do you smell that? Do you smell that? I mean, it smells like death in here. It smells so bad. Turn to your neighbor and be like, yo, you smell like death, bro. You smell like death, bro. It stinks up in here. It smells like death up in here. But the death that I'm smelling with these nose holes, the death that's coming up into these nostrils, it's not physical smell, okay? So you can relax. Everyone go, ooh, okay, it wasn't my BO. It wasn't my bad breath. I showered this morning, okay? We're not talking about a physical stank up in this place. We're talking about a spiritual stank. You and I spiritually stink. We smell like death. You ever smelled roadkill before? You ever smelled roadkill? Something that's died? There's a reason why we say something smells like something died in here, because death reeks. And you and me, we reek. We smell like death because there is a spiritual death in every one of us. And in order for us to understand baptism at all, we've got to understand our relationship with spiritual death. You and I have death in our life. It's spiritual. And we've got to understand how we relate and have a relationship with death. How eventually we can have, through Jesus, a relationship with life before we can understand baptism. We've got to get it through our heads that death is a part of the equation. Now, in order for us to understand this, I think it's easier to visually see things. I'm a visual learner. Any visual learners in here? When I was in school, it did not help me at all to read or if my teacher would talk to me, but if they got up on that whiteboard, a whiteboard, it got through this dome, okay? I'm visual. So if you're visual like me, I got a good presentation to help us understand how you and I have spiritual death, and we've got to understand how it works before we can understand baptism. So this right here, this jar labeled me, is you and me. So just do yourself a favor, just wave to yourself really quick. Go, hi, me. Hey, me. Just be like, you looking good this morning, me. Who put that fit together? You look good. Okay, this is you, and this is me. What do you notice about this glass? This glass is clean, it's clear, it's pure. There's no death in this. It's because Jesus, who is God, created you and me to look like him. To see how the original design for you and me was that you and me would look like him. And the way that he looks, the way that Jesus looks, he looks like life. The book of John chapter 1, it talks about Jesus. It says that Jesus is the life that is light in the darkness, and light cannot overcome it. He is life, and he created you and me to look like that, to be full of life. So the original design of you and me is to look like Jesus. The bad news is that you and me, we don't look like this on our own, though. You and me, we don't look like Jesus because something happened. Something happened that changed the way you and I look, that changed the insides of us, the way that we behave, the way that we act, the way that we think, the way that we are. And that thing is called sin. Sin, aka death. Sin has corrupted the world, it's corrupted you and me, and it's led to only one thing. The outcome to sin is only one thing. Does anyone know what that thing is? Death. The outcome to sin is death. So this sin entered the world, which meant death entered. And when that happened, sin corrupted you and me and your neighbors, your parents, the person you're sitting next to, the person that drove you here has been affected by sin. It's so much more than just being a good person or a bad person, because you might be thinking to yourself, man, sin. I'm pretty good. I've never missed school. I have perfect attendance. Or I've never cussed anybody out on Fortnite before. There's no sin up in this thing. I tie my shoes perfectly. I iron my clothes with no wrinkles. I'm clean, I'm good, and the truth is that might be true, but it doesn't mean that you're not dead. Because we're not talking about good and evil, we're talking about death and life. And sin is an issue of death, not an issue of good or bad. You and me are dead because sin came into the world, and guess what? You and me, who are supposed to look like Jesus, sin got into us, and instead of looking like him, we now look like death. And there's no way around it. Same way that I can't just take a strainer and I can't pour the contents of me out and try and separate the death from the life. Guess what? When death enters, it stays. It leaves its mark. You and me have death in us. And that's why God sent his son Jesus to the world. Maybe you've heard the name Jesus before. Maybe for you've only heard it as a name. You didn't know that there was a person associated with the name. The person of Jesus is the Son of God. God sent his son to deal with your death. And he dealt with it by sending his son, who is God, to the earth to live a sinless, deathless life. He sent Jesus onto a mission, a rescue mission, to live among the dead. He sent him into a zombie apocalypse. Jesus lived amongst dead people, and he showed dead people like me and you what it's like to live full of life, full of his life. And eventually he had to deal with our death. And you know the way that he did it was he actually took on death. He took it on. He stepped into the ring and he went 10 rounds with it, and he beat it. He beat it on the cross because he physically died. It looks like this. Jesus went to a cross after living a perfect life. He died a physical death, and God raised him physically back to life. Why did he do that? He did that because God needed to deal with death. And the only way to deal with death, because it's permanent and it's forever and you can't separate it, is death has to be defeated. And Jesus defeated it by dying and then raising back to life so that death didn't have a grip on him anymore. It doesn't have any type of hold on Jesus. And because Jesus beat death, Jesus has invited you and me to live a life full of his life. And what happens when you accept and put your faith in Jesus, the one that beat death, you know what happens? He goes into you. And no matter how much death is in you, the darkness cannot overcome the light. And Jesus turns you from dead to alive. And no matter how much more death you put in here, it can't overcome the life that Jesus has now given you. So baptism, the reason we get baptized is because we have accepted, when I say we, it's people that have put their faith in Jesus and accepted his life. We've accepted the life that beats death. And Jesus has beaten the death out of us. So we get baptized. Look at this picture. We get baptized because the same way that Jesus died and was buried and rose again, we go into water. We go into water in baptism to symbolically raise back up to life so that our old life is dead and left in the water, and me and you are alive walking with Jesus, full of his life. It's not the water that changes you, it's Jesus coming into your life that changes you. And baptism is your way and my way of publicly telling the world, just like Jesus died and rose to life, I'm going to die to my old way and live with the life that Jesus has for me. I'm going to accept his life. I'm going to leave the old way behind and raise to new life in Jesus. That's why we get baptized. And that's what baptism's all about. Now, maybe you've been baptized in here and you're like, yeah, that's exactly why I did it. I get it. Or maybe you've been living with that new life in Jesus, but you've never been baptized. Well, today I would say your next step is to get baptized. Your next step is to tell the world and show the world, my old way's gone. My new way with Jesus is here. Or maybe you've never heard that Jesus is the only way to get the death out of you. He's the only way to life. And your job today, your everyday starts today. I mean, you came to church maybe thinking that you were just going to come and play basketball. You came to church because we have good snacks here. You came to church because your friend comes. You came to church because your parents dropped you off and you didn't have a reason. I don't care why you came. You know why God brought you here? Because he wanted to get the death out of you. And he wanted to bring the life into you. That's why you're here. And for you, your next step is to receive the life that Jesus has for you. Your C group leaders are the perfect person to talk to about that. They want you to receive that life that Jesus has for you. This right here, so you can look like him. You can be full of him and get the death out of you. And then baptism is the way that we tell the world, I am now dead to my old way and alive with new life in Jesus. That's what baptism is. But, no matter where you are on that spectrum, how does baptism actually affect me every day? Because that's what we're talking about today, isn't it? Every day. Well, what does this have to do with you and me every day? Well, God is really smart, and he's an artist, and he interweaves all different narratives into one storyline. There's a story of Jesus and he dying for you, and then there's a story of how we get baptized, and then there's this way in the story of how we live every day with Jesus. Guess what? They're all one story. They all weave together. Jesus said it best. Jesus said, if you want to walk with me every day, he says it in Luke 9, verse 23 and 24. He said, you want to walk with me every day? Here's what it's going to take. It's going to take you giving up your own way, giving up your old way, and taking up your cross daily. That just means dying to yourself. The cross, the place where Jesus died, was meant to kill things. So when Jesus says, take up your cross, he's saying, you've got to die every day if you want to follow me. You might not have known this, but following Jesus is about dying. It's about dying to your old life and living with the way and life of Jesus in you. That's what it means to follow Jesus every day. That's why baptism is a symbol. It's a symbol to help us remember. So when you think back to your baptism, you go, that's right, I left my old way behind. I'm going to live with the new way of Jesus. So your old way may have been cussing people out in Fortnite. Jesus says, you want to follow me every day? Leave that behind. It's dead. It's dead in the water. I've taken care of it. Now you can walk with me, and you don't have to have anger. You can have patience. You don't have to have jealousy, but you could have joy. You don't have to have anxiety. That's dead in the water. Leave it behind. It's your old way. I have peace for you. Baptism is a symbol of what it means to follow Jesus every day. And following Jesus every day means dying to your old way and receiving the life that Jesus has for you. So maybe today your next step is accepting Jesus for the very first time. Talk to your secret leader about it. Maybe your step is getting baptized today. Maybe your step is getting baptized next week, or maybe you've been baptized and you're like, it's finally time that I pick up my cross, I die daily, and I live with the life that Jesus has for me. One final story for you, a story of a kid named Adam, who's a middle schooler. And he goes to Oakley, and he comes to one of our later services. Adam decided to get baptized at camp. And I told you we almost had 300 baptisms at camp. We had 296, but Adam decided not to get baptized at camp. If he did, we would have had 297. But we have 296 because Adam decided at camp, I'm going to get baptized, but I'm not going to get baptized at camp because Adam knew that back home, when he got back from camp, he had parents and siblings who were still dead. And he decided that he wanted his baptism to be a way that his dead family could see that there's new life. There's life in Jesus available for them. So Adam left camp and he went home and he told his parents, hey, I've given my life over to Jesus. I have new life in him and I'm going to get baptized. Will you come and watch me? Well, guess what? Adam's getting baptized today, later today. And guess who's getting baptized next weekend? His whole family. His whole family. Because Adam gets it. His old life is dead and his new life is here. Jesus gives us new life and he wants you to have it too. Jesus, thank you for the life that you give us. Baptism's more than just a one-time thing. God, it is a reminder to live new life with you every day. Thank you for the life you give us. In Jesus' name, amen. Oh, hey, we're going to go to C groups here in a second where we